What a time to be alive. We now live in a world where there is a new Star Wars movie just about every year for who knows how long that's going to be going on. I guess as long as the franchise remains lucrative, I guess. Last year, of course, we had Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. And while Hollywood moves pretty fast, I guess it doesn't move fast enough to get us Episode 8 this year. Instead, we have kind of a one-off movie, sort of a prequel, a spin-off, a Star Wars story, basically. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and the story depicted here is what would be basically just kind of like a footnote in the original film, the 1977 film, about the Rebel Alliance and kind of a band of freedom fighters who are able to track down and transmit the plans to the Death Star so that they could be sent to Princess Leia, put on R2-D2, given to Luke Skywalker, given to the Rebel Alliance, and used to blow up the Death Star at the end of the 77 film. It's kind of a very tiny story, kind of augmented to serve Rogue One, the Star Wars story. And I think it is a story that is interesting and worth telling. I mean, kind of what they're doing so far. I mean, Disney, this is the second kind of Disney-produced Star Wars film, and since they've acquired the rights, I think they're still being at least a little bit safe with the material, which I think is wise, at least kind of keeping in the shallow end, at least at first, because I mean it is such an expansive universe, right? This rich universe with so much to take from, so many stories to tell, but they're still being a little bit safe. Like, of course, one criticism to Force Awakens was that it was very similar to A New Hope. It borrowed a lot of story elements from that, things like that. Here, it's a very familiar and safe kind of story. Let's show the Rebel Alliance. Let's show them getting the Death Star plans. Let's throw in as much fan service as we can. Get the CGI characters like Grand Moff Tarkin and Darth Vader. He's got to be in it, right? And things like that, and other surprises here and there. So they're staying somewhat safe, which I think is at least kind of in this first wave is probably the smarter thing to do. And I do think it's a good story generally. Has enough material to kind of justify its own existence, where, I mean, this, unless you count the Ewok movies, or God forbid, the holiday special, the dreaded, infamous holiday special, this really is the first of its kind, the first kind of Star Wars spin-off. So, what we get here, I mean, the plot, straightforward enough. We have our lead character, Jyn, played by Felicity Jones. She's kind of being raised on the outskirts of the universe, going from place to place. Her father was essentially captured by the Empire because of his brilliant mind in designing these space stations and positioned to build the Death Star for them, basically, as a part of this larger Empire team. She kind of runs away, and she grows up to sort of be, reluctantly so, a freedom fighter for the Rebel Alliance. So that's basically the plot of the movie. And being this kind of spin-off, and being this kind of story, I think it does enough to differentiate itself from the rest of the movie. So we know, kind of going into it, that it's not part of the overall quote-unquote more important story of the Skywalker lineage and things like that. Where, I mean, one thing it definitely does, we don't have kind of the trademark things of Star Wars, like, say, the beginning and ends of these types of movies. First thing we got to have in a Star Wars movie, of course, is the opening crawl, which is absent from Rogue One. And the last thing we have to have in a Star Wars movie is a scene without dialogue, which is also absent from Rogue One. Also, this is the first one without a score from John Williams, which I'll admit was pretty missed. And one thing that I say sets this movie quite a bit apart is its tone. I mean, this is actually quite a serious movie, and it takes the material quite seriously, which, I mean, comes with good things and bad things to it. Definitely they pay a certain amount of reverence to this story, and just the general tone of it feels very different from the action adventure space opera serial. It's almost like this DEA drug deal kind of thriller kind of movie where, like, we'll like see people with like burlap sacks over their head and shit in dark rooms being interrogated and shit like that, and like a heist movie, and very thrilling and kind of edge of your seat tense kind of stuff, which is different from most Star Wars movie. It has a different kind of feel and flavor to it, which is interesting. But at the same time, I mean, being so serious, I feel in some ways the fun has been sucked out of the movie. Because, like, you might recall, like, remember when Revenge of the Sith came out? And George Lucas, he was very, very vocal in interviews saying, this is not a movie for kids. Kids shouldn't see it. Anakin is selling his soul. It's very sad and horrible and things like that. And while definitely like something like Revenge of the Sith has its dark moments, still you kind of go into it and you're like, well, this is fun, silly stuff. I mean, we have, lots of big action scenes, and like Obi-Wan's like riding a dragon lizard or something like that, and there's still all the crazy, stupid shit that you see in Star Wars, despite kind of the darkness of it. But Rogue One, it gets pretty fucking bleak in the movie, so I wouldn't say this is something like you can take like a 6-year-old kid to or something like that. Definitely for more of the mature audience, which, I mean, Star Wars movies have audiences of all ages. I think this one probably isn't generally suitable for very young kids. One, just due to the content. And, like, there's some, pretty intense scenes of violence and things like that. Not that kids can't handle violence, but, there's just also kind of like generally, I don't know, long drawn out like dialogue scenes where there's not that much kind of stuff, but it has the general stuff that you look for in a Star Wars movie. There's big space dogfights and ground skirmishes and really cool stuff like that. So I think they did a really good job in creating those scenes. So, I mean, I think it feels true to kind of Star Wars action and things like that. But, stepping back from it a little bit, what the movie kind of stands for is kind of this story of these, altruistic freedom fighters who are, fighting for a bigger cause and things like that. So it gets pretty heavy. And it indeed gets pretty bleak without like giving too much away. But not everybody who we see at the beginning of the movie is going to make it to the end of the movie. I'll say that much. And I don't know. Going into a Star Wars movie, it's escapism. It's supposed to be fun, I guess. And I don't know if I walked out of this movie feeling like I had a fun time. I enjoyed the movie, but I don't know. But there is quite a few elements to it that I really enjoyed, and I love the fan service. I mean, we do see Darth Vader, of course, and some other characters. Grand Moff Tarkin, which, I mean, one thing I mentioned in my review last year of The Force Awakens is that when I go into a Star Wars movie, not only do I expect fun, but I'm also kind of expecting really, really incredible special effects, like boundary-pushing special effects, which we got from the original trilogy, we got from the prequel trilogy, like it or not. Force Awakens, really good special effects, but nothing, say, groundbreaking. But here what we actually get some really innovative special effects that work kind of more on a subconscious kind of level with these kind of motion capture, digitally modeled versions of characters that we've seen before. Like, for example, we see the Grand Moff Tarkin character played originally in 1977 by Peter Cushing. Here, there's a stand-in actor. I'm sorry, I forget his name, but they digitally change him to make him look just like Peter Cushing did all those years ago, which is pretty impressive. In fact, most impressive. And you think where they were just a few years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, with Tron Legacy, and doing that kind of stuff where they make, Jeff Bridges look like he did in 1982 or whatever. And you think, okay, I get it. It kind of looks like the way it should, but it's still just a little bit off. And here, very much an improvement over that kind of technology that we've seen just a few years ago. There's a big improvement, more convincing, but we still kind of sense it. We kind of know that we're looking at a digital thing. But think of how, just in those short years, how much the technology improved. Think about what we could see in another 10 years. I mean, it's very possible if they keep doing these separate stories, these one-off stories, we could potentially see kind of digitally rendered versions of characters that we saw in the original trilogy. Like we could see things that take place in between New Hope, in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, or in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, in either using the actors' voices only or sound alikes, but using their likeness, which I suppose Lucasfilm has the rights to. But the possibilities are endless, and that's very exciting. So again, I feel this is sort of experimental in that sense. So that lends very exciting possibilities to the future of the franchise. But other than that, I mean, standard kind of Star Wars stuff. We see, spaceships flying and shooting and all the kind of Empire ships and, the walkers and all that kind of stuff. And we get some good characters. I mean, I really like the Donnie Yen character, who's this kind of almost like a samurai type of character. He's the blind, wise man who I thought was really good. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I thought he was pretty good. And, Jin, in general, is a pretty okay character. Like, I don't think, for how heavy the movie gets, for how reverent it is with the material, I mean, for the most part, the characters are fairly one-noted. I mean, we have the general arc of the Jin character, where she does kind of turn from this apathetic kind of character to someone who cares for the cause, sort of. But we get it in more of... We hear about it more than we actually feel it, I guess. Like, there's no, big scene where she's, looking into the streets of, just a normal world and see how horrible the Empire has affected it, and, single tear or something like that. More kind of about her father and kind of learning what he kind of stood for and things like that, which works pretty good. And, I think maybe there is a little bit of message there about, apathy and, fighting for what's right. There's a good scene with her and Forrest Whitaker's character, Che Guevara, I think he's called, where he's like, doesn't it bother you to look up in the sky and see the Empire flag waving? And she says, well, I just don't look up. And it's like, okay, it's apathetic character. I think we can learn some kind of lessons about, really learning what to believe in, what to fight, and things like that. So I think it's kind of, I don't know, semi-inspirational in that way, but in a lot of ways it's just kind of general dialogue, nothing too stand outish. Like, people complain about the prequel movies that don't have memorable dialogue or anything like that. I don't, besides the Force mantra, I don't think there's too much that stood out here. Not too much that stood out amongst the characters. Though, of course, I mean, the standout character in this movie, without a doubt, is the robot character, K2SO, played by Alan Tudyk, who's great, really funny. Like, you heard about reshoots in the movie where maybe, if it was bleak before the reshoots, who knows how fucking depressing it was before. He has all the funny lines, and he's very funny. There is a good line from him. There's a problem on the horizon. There's no horizon, which I thought was pretty funny. And, just kind of the sarcastic asshole kind of robot. He's a reprogrammed Empire battle droid, which, I thought was an interesting aspect for a droid character. Gives him a little bit of flair, which I thought was good. And, generally it's a good character. It's really the only standout character of the movie, unless you want to count Donnie Yen too, which is pretty good. But the thing is, with these Star Wars movies, what I kind of want, what I kind of expect, I like to have these big adventures. I like to see crazy alien characters and crazy robot characters and go from planet to planet and have these great adventures. I think this is a good story. I think it's told with competence and confidence. I think it has a lot of tense scenes and is done skillfully on the part of Gareth Edwards and writer Chris Weitz. But it wasn't a grand adventure that left me feeling, I don't know, pumped and fun. I don't know. It's hard to describe. I felt like for the first time, even like Empire, which has kind of a downer ending, even Sith, which kind of has a downer ending, they do have hope. This one literally has to explicitly tell you to have hope in a weird way. So this is really the first Star Wars movie that I came out of feeling kind of bummed out, which is a weird thing. But for all its downfallings, I think it does Star Wars justice. I think it's a good first step into kind of an expanded film universe, which we could see year after year after year, which is very exciting. So I would rate Star Wars Rogue One or Rogue One, a Star Wars story, whatever you want to call it. 3 stars out of 4. The technical aspects are there. Great action. Very good acting for the most part. A story worth telling. But I didn't have fun. So it's not a masterpiece. I don't think it's a masterpiece of any sense. So, I don't know. Maybe there'll be a lot of people going into this saying, oh yeah, it's the best Star Wars movie ever. Way better than the stupid fucking prequels. I don't know. I had fun with the prequels. Sue me. But, for the most part, it's an enjoyable movie. Felicity Jones, really good. Diego Luna, very good. Alan Tudyk. Mads Mikkelsen, fucking Hannibal. He's great in the movie, too, playing Jin's father. Oh, and Ben Daniels, from the Exorcist series. He makes a brief appearance in it, which is pretty cool. And needless to say, we do have some very cool scenes with Darth Vader, which I won't give away, but that fan service alone is almost worth the price of admission. So, yeah, Rogue One, I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it, and what can I say? I look forward to more Star Wars movies on the horizon. So thank you very much for watching. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Visit Dare237.com. And until next time, may the Force be with you. Always.